Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Women Together session. My name is Antoinette, and I am the host of Women Together. It is a joy to see you all and to see us coming in here. A warm welcome from myself and from our lovely team, Karen, Ella, and Ethi, who are here as well. And I see us already typing into the chat, just sharing a little bit about a little hello and where we're coming from. So it's great. So I see a hello from Maine, from Felton, California. You know, there are more above that. But just, you can type in a little hello, and I see so many familiar faces. So warm welcome to all of us from all of our different spaces and places. And, you know, it's just wonderful to come together. We do this each week and really just find a way to connect with each other and connect with ourselves. So it really is an opportunity to just deepen a little moment on a Tuesday to just deepen our connection with ourselves and each other. So wonderful to be here with each of you. And if you are brand new, a warm welcome to you as well. It's wonderful to have us all here. So today we're going to go into a topic of generous listening, which is a classic of ours. It is something that we've been thinking about and working on for a long time, and it requires constant practice. So it's an invitation for us to continue to be a community of practice together. We do tiny practices, and we'll have a few of those today. So I encourage you to have a paper and pen, or a journal and a pen. We will do a little journaling exercise later today. And this may feel familiar for some of you who have done this before. Our day will consist of, or our hour together will consist of a little bit of tiny practice, just landing here together. We'll do a little bit of work on generous listening, and then we'll go into actually practice together. So we'll move into breakout groups, and that's where we'll spend the bulk of our time together if you're here in Zoom. And if we're on YouTube, we'll let you go after about the first 20 minutes to half an hour. And that's really our day. So I just am so grateful to all of us joining. This really is our practice time. And I love the quote that went out with the email today, and I'll just reread it to just kick us off. It's by Rachel Naomi Riemann. And the quote is, "When you listen generously to people, they can hear truth in themselves, often for the first time. When you listen generously to people, they can hear truth in themselves, often for the first time." So that is a little bit of our, I'll put that in the chat in just a few moments. I'd like to invite us to land here as we dive into this topic of generous listening. So if you'd like to take a breath and just relax, take a deep breath, find your seat. Feel your feet on the ground. And as you feel your feet on the ground, feeling a little sense of uplift in the spine, breathing in and out through the nose. Just feeling the quality of the breath today. Almost as if the breath was a way to tune the instrument of the body. So just being with the breath as a tuning of the instrument of the body. You can hear the breath moving into the lungs. So as you fill the lungs, really hearing the lungs. Hearing the breath as it moves in through the nose. Hearing it as it moves through the chest cavity. Hearing as it moves, it feels like it's moving into the belly. So just hearing the breath as it fills the body, and then hearing the breath as it releases. And as you breathe deep, I can almost feel it in my toes. I can almost feel the breath in my toes. So just feeling the breath moving in and out, up and down the body. As you exhale, feeling the breath moving up from the toes, up the spine, up the top of the head, out the crown of the head, exhaling out completely. And we'll take one more inhale together, fill the body. And then exhale, release. Knowing that just putting the awareness and the attention on the breath at any point in the day can be a tiny practice in and of itself. So often we're paying attention to other things, the conversation, the other people, what's going on, this thing that I'm doing over here, that we lose this connection to the breath, the awareness that we have of the breath. So just continuing to come back to the breath at any point in the day. And when you're ready, you can reconnect with the screen. And if you don't have your video on, now is the time to get your video on and to just take in. It looks like little boxes on the screen, but these beautiful faces and beings who've shown up today to connect with each other. It's just really taking in this incredible group here. And if you can share a breath. So we can just take a breath in and share a breath with each other. Just a welcoming breath, a warm, welcoming breath to each other. And you can pick just a few boxes and send a warm welcome. So I'm picking 4 little boxes, and I'm just sending a warm welcome with my whole heart, my whole being to these wonderful women who've shown up today. And the waving begins. We just welcome each other. And it's that moment when we come in and see each other. And it is as if we can feel each other. We can feel each other coming into this circle, into this group together. And then as we join into this circle, we just note the intention. So what brought me here today? What brought us here today? And we can type that into the chat and just share what brought me here today. And perhaps it was something about the topic. So what brought you here today? And if there was something specific about generous listening that you'd like to dive into, now's the time to share it, and I will read it out in the chat. My weekly fix of calm and connection, desire to learn more about generous listening, how it differs from other types of listening. The quote of deeply listening is the big theme in my life right now. Need to practice this. Togetherness, listening is such a gift. Learning, change, growth. I want to learn how to be a more generous listener. I wish I could always come when I can come for the connection and learning something new. Wonderful to have you here, Susie. Kathleen, connection and deep interest in what we can give each other through authentic openness to each other. the ability to connect with this amazing group of women, welcome listening practice, an opportunity to bond and to feel resonance with others' journeys. Lisa says the magic of meeting new women and hearing their stories. Renee, being open to listening without being distracted or biased or overthinking in my head. Elizabeth says, my cat Terry seemed to meditate during Antoinette's talk. I'll have to record her voice. We both needed to slow down. I agree. I often just need to be reminded to slow down. And this is a great moment to do it. Not solving, listening. Listening is so very important. It brings us into the now, out of our own heads. It's from Rosalina. The pathway to tender conversations. Diane says, so happy to be here now. Listening without judgment. Beautiful. And I'll just double check if we have any more in the YouTube world. We've got greetings from Owatonna, Minnesota, and hello from the Adirondacks. Lena says listening requires focus. We have from YouTube to listen more and we will learn more. Beautiful. So we know listening is the best gift we can ever give one another. That's from June. Wonderful. So we'll just dive in a little bit and I'll share that quote again because I think it really is such a lovely invitation to generous listening. So when you listen generously to people, they can hear truth in themselves, often for the first time. That's Rachel Naomi Riemann. This is the quote. And the interesting thing, and someone asked earlier, a few moments ago in the chat, the difference between generous listening and other types of listening. That was Andrea. And I'd like to dive in a little bit to some of the thinking behind this, the theories of active listening, deep listening, generative listening, and what we came to as generous listening. And, really, Pat said it earlier, listening is such a gift. And we'll dive in a bit with journaling to just remind ourselves of when was the time that I experienced being listened to in such a way that moved me. But I'll just share a couple of things about listening. When we practice active listening or deep listening, often we're listening so that we can repeat it back. We're listening, did I get what you said? Did I hear this correctly? And let me repeat it back to you. And we're listening directly for the words. And that's a beautiful way to listen to each other. And it opens up a lot of possibilities for communication, transparent communication, a lot of, nonviolent communication uses that kind of tactic, really listening for the words, listening to how I feel when you said those words so that I can come up with, how did I feel so that I can share that with you, and those are all really important and beautiful ways to kind of deepen our listening practice. When we here in Women Together talk about generous listening, we're really building on a couple of bodies of work, but one of the main ones, and I talk about that a lot in here, is the Presencing Institute. And Otto Scharmer, who's a professor, a senior lecturer at MIT, and the founder of the Presencing Institute, he goes through 4 different levels of listening. So we've built on that, and we still, see the 4 levels of listening, and I'll explain those. But we landed on kind of 3 ways of thinking about listening. So I'll explain the 4 levels of listening first. So the 4 levels of listening, the first one is sort of downloading. So when I'm downloading, I am kind of taking in what I hear and sort of I can regurgitate it out, or I can maybe I think about school children, like when I here's the spelling thing, I download what I need to, and I sort of spit it back out. And then the second one, and the other thing about downloading is that you sort of stay exactly where you are. Otto draws a circle, and then you sort of stay in the center of the circle. And this is, I take it in. I'm not really learning anything new, but I can take it in. And it just goes out again. The factual listening, the second level of listening, factual listening, is when I start to go to the window. So I go to the window and I can maybe take in a couple of facts. Oh, that happened at this time in this place in this year. I can take in the facts of what happened. And, if we do that circle again, the dot, myself, I've gone to the edge, to the window. The next level of listening is called empathic listening. And I think a lot of us here in this room know empathic listening well. We have become very empathic listeners and sometimes over empathic listeners. But the idea of empathy and the idea of being an empathic listener is when I'm hearing someone share a story, I almost step into their shoes. So if I look at that circle, I kind of start to step out of the circle, or I can make a connection with the outside. I can see that the window it almost becomes a door. I can move through that and I can feel what it feels like to be in that other person's shoes. I can listen from the heart. And that experience of empathic listening, it can be so important for us when we're going through something, or when somebody that we know is going through something, and we can just really hear them, and we can hear their heart, we can hear their sadness, we can hear their joy. And then generative listening is about the co-creation moment. So generative listening, the word generative comes from the word generate. So generative listening is when you start to listen beyond the words and you listen for possibility. And often if you're an artist will listen to, it's not even there yet, but it's trying to land. If I look at a canvas and it's blank, and then I listen for what's possible on that canvas and I create from there. Or another example in between people is when you have a teacher and they're such a good teacher and they're listening to the student's highest possibility and they're teaching to that. So really somebody who's listening for what's the the deepest potential that this student has, and how do I teach to that. So when we're here, some of that is really listening for possibility and listening for our highest potential. But what we realized is that taking that framework, our way of doing that here is really generous listening. What we realize is that when we when we even attend to these levels of listening, we start to give ourselves a gift. We start to give ourselves and our communities the gift of listening. So it becomes something the generosity of our spirit, the generosity of our heart, the generosity of our being available to each other, really being available, not just, oh yeah, I'm free, I can pick up the phone now, but actually being available to listen to another person. So what does that take? And what we think about is it's listening beyond our own projection. So I often talk about this story, and this is a very, very simple little practice. But, when I have a friend who starts telling me a story about their mom, and I think, oh, I have a mom. I know what that story is like. I know what that's about. And, oh, I had that same experience with mom. I know exactly what it is. That is my own projection. And often it is much more subtle than that. It is not just a similar experience. We put ourselves in someone's shoes and all of a sudden we're projecting something onto the situation. So it's listening beyond our own projection. It's listening and hearing what's actually there. So really when I look and listen, when we when we come into the Zoom meeting and we sit down and we're here with ourselves and we're sort of just, okay, here's Antoinette, la la la. And then when we do this practice of really seeing and feeling each other, and we're with the Zoom screen and people start waving and smiling and we're connecting with what's really there. We're connecting with ourselves being here in this room, but we're connecting with what's really there in these beautiful women. And then we're listening to what's possible. So often we do a little intention moment and all of a sudden we're tapping into, it's possible that I could grow, that I could learn something, that I can connect with other people. I'm listening into what's possible. And when we listen to each other and we give each other the gift of listening, we go into these small groups or we go, into our own lives and we give someone else the gift of listening. We really are listening to what's possible, what's here at this moment, not my projection of what it is, not, what I wish they would be, but really to just what's there and the truth of what's there. It's not always pretty, but the truth of what's there. If I'm experiencing rage in this, if I'm experiencing sadness, if I'm experiencing joy, it's not about saying, oh, I'm going to listen to what's there for that other person. It's about really listening to what's coming up. That's the generous part of it. And then listening to what's possible. So I'd love to just let us do a little journaling practice to feel into this a bit. And then we'll go into our time together to just practice listening to each other. So I'd like to invite you to just take out your paper and pen or pencil. It's often really helpful to just actually have the work of the hands and feel the pen on the paper. But if typing is your jam, go for it. And if it's an iPad with a pencil or something, do what you need to do. Apple pen, whatever it is, or whatever brand. So what I'd like you to do is to think of a time when you experienced being heard by someone who was listening with empathy. So I want you to think of a time when you experienced being heard by someone who is listening with empathy. And somebody really heard what you had to say, really heard how you felt. What did it feel like to be listened to in that way? What did it feel like to be listened to in that way? So I'll say it one more time. Think of a time when you experienced being heard by someone who was listening with empathy. What did it feel like to be listened to in that way? And I mentioned generative listening. So really, this is the type of listening that is seeing something at its future possibility, at its highest possibility, or even just the tuning into possibility. So again, it's the one that could be with an artist, or it could be a teacher, somebody who's seeing the highest future possibility. And perhaps you've experienced that. So the question is really, have you experienced generative listening? And if you did, or when you did, what did it feel like? So it could be that you co-created something with someone, that you really tuned into the magic of what was possible together. What did that feel like? And it could be in the body. It could be in an emotional space or sensation. But just writing down a little bit of, think of a time when you experienced generative listening. What did it feel like? And if you didn't, that's okay. You could think about, you could just write down no, and then think about, what was the closest thing to that maybe, or a time where you listened with empathy. So think of a time when you experienced generative listening. What did it feel like? And then just tuning into generous listening. What practices do you need to do to make yourself available? So, what practices do you do to make yourself available for generous listening? Because often we're sort of half here. We're halfway here. We're listening to somebody, but we're sort of thinking of the next thing. We're listening to somebody, or they're talking to us, but we're sort of, you know, thinking about our own projection. So, what practices do you do to be fully present? What practices do you do to be fully present for generous listening? And then finally, where do you feel it in the body when you feel truly heard? So, when you feel truly heard by someone that you're connecting with, where do you feel it in the body when you feel truly heard? And I'll tell you, sometimes when I'm with people who are really, truly listening to me, I well up. I can feel it behind my eyes, I can feel it in my heart. So, where do you feel it in the body when you feel truly heard? I could ask you the same for when you don't feel truly heard, because for me, my shoulders come up, I numb out completely. So, where do you feel it in the body when you feel truly heard? And then we are going to turn to each other in the chat in the breakout rooms for about 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do before we do that is just remind us of some of our practices, especially because the session is on generous listening. So as you go into this breakout room, our little groups of 3 or 4 of us, you share your name, really introduce yourself. Where are you coming from? And just a little, my name is Antoinette. I'm coming from Cortland Manor, New York. And today I'm sitting with the trees, the green of the trees, something that is really where you're coming from. And then tuning into how we listen to each other. Listen for what's possible. When you're looking at this wonderful small group of human beings, really just seeing them at what's possible here between us, for each one, the one who's speaking, and just making ourselves fully available. Really speak from the heart. So when you're making yourself available, think about the practices that you need to do to be fully present here. Think about what you need to do to really listen to each other. And then speak from the heart. So one of the encouragements that I have is to have a strong back. We can carry a lot, but to have a really soft front, to have a really soft heart when we're listening. Someone mentioned earlier, tender conversations. And Tamar mentioned listening is witnessing. So really holding a soft heart to take in what we're hearing and what we're seeing as we listen. And the other invitation is to use I statements. I often say that we don't know what the other person had for breakfast, let alone what they've gone through in all of their lives. And the important thing to do in our session today and in general is to really speak from your own experience, not in a general, like, when you go to the store and it's like this, but really speaking from a place of the heart. So that's the invitation for today's practice. We'll move into breakouts here in Zoom and share what came up for you. What happened for you when you really are deeply listened to? So what happens for you when you're listened to or heard by someone with who's listening with empathy? What did it feel like to be listened to in that way? So you can share a little bit from your journaling practice, and where do you feel it in the body when you feel truly heard? So thinking about, your own experience of being listened to, or you could share a little bit of your own experience about what happens in the body when you listen to somebody else. So just noticing what comes up. And what I'd like to invite you to do is to take these 20 minutes together and give each other enough time to share your name, a little bit about the experience, and then hopefully a few minutes before the end of the session, just remarking on what was it like to listen in this way. So today is a little meta of listening to how we listen in our breakouts. But, this is such an important practice, because when we really do listen to each other and attend in this way, it opens so much for the rest of our lives and our communities and the people who we're with. So this is the moment. Enjoy the time together in this community of practice. We'll see you back in 20 minutes.